Thanks for staying with us on The Real Story. We just heard from Democratic and Republican leadership in the House about this week's priorities. So it's a good time to welcome back political journalist Christine Stuart. She is the owner of the website ctnewsjunkie.com. Good morning, Christine. Welcome back on The Real Story.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so you've been closely following everything that's going on. We know that this week is going to be kind of a mad rush for them to get things done. It was already a mad rush because it's a shorter budget session, this legislative session. But I want to start with the budget adjustments that are going to bring tax relief to certain Connecticut residents. There was friction, right, between Senate, or not just Senate, but Republicans and Democrats over how to actually bring relief.
There was actually friction between Democrats and Democrats. The Democratic Finance Committee put forward a package that was $784 million more than the spending package that their own Appropriations Committee put forward. So there was a lot of disagreement on exactly where to cut taxes. There wasn't as much disagreement on where they would be spending this money. And remember, Connecticut right now has a surplus. So it's an argument over how much do we give back to the taxpayers at the same time as making sure we have enough money in our coffers to pay down that pension debt.
Yeah, and there was even tension with the governor and Democrats, right? Like on how to bring tax relief.
There was. So he had proposed a property tax credit, and the Democrats were like, okay, well, that's great. We can get on board with that. And then he also proposed reducing the municipal car tax by more than the Democrats ended up agreeing to. And he wasn't necessarily sold on the child tax credit. So the child tax credit is pared down to $250 for the next year, and then it expires. So they will give a child tax credit, but not as generous as the $600 that was initially proposed.
And obviously Republicans, they believe that they want the relief right away as opposed to tax credits. I know Representative Candelora said that he was happy with the gas tax extension. He was just saying that last segment, but he feels like there should be more broad-based tax help for people. But that being said, both chambers don't necessarily need Republicans on board with this because Democrats have the majority in the House and the Senate.
That is correct. And, basically he wasn't on board necessarily with the child tax credit either because he didn't believe that it reached enough of the population in order to really make a difference. Look, we're facing, 40-year high of inflation, and, Connecticut taxpayers are struggling to get by. They're not seeing the increase in wages. We have, mortgage rates are increasing, and, it's making it harder for people to secure a home. So the economy and people are really struggling. So, right, he would be happy with the gas tax holiday being extended, but they wanted to do something more on the sales tax, and they also wanted to give an income tax break.
And when we were talking before this segment, you pointed something out that I was like, oh, interesting, because there have been years past. I know when I was covering legislature at points, when I was reporting, where Republicans were just getting the bill in a couple hours before the session was ending and then being forced to vote on it. And, they're hoping, we're hearing that this budget bill is going to be done by Monday, but there's also a reason for it, right?
There really is a reason for it. So in the bipartisan budget that they passed in 2017, when Malloy was governor, they were able to negotiate a bunch of stuff in that, including that the bill had to be on your desk 72 hours in advance of the vote. So that means basically the latest that one of the chambers could vote on this would be Monday. And there was also some other things in that budget that Republicans are really quite proud that they pushed Democrats on, including, a revenue cap, a volatility cap, expansion of the spending cap. So this really does set forward what they can and can't do. And also this year we might have had a lot of federal funding come into the state, but at the same time with that federal funding, they said you could only give a tax credit of 1% of that funding. So they could only give back to taxpayers about $180 million per year. So they really had to pick and choose where they were going to do their tax cuts.
Yeah, and we know that both leaders just addressed that in the last segment because, Republicans and Democrats also felt very differently on that. Republicans wanting to push the federal government on that rule. Okay, let's talk about some of the other priorities here. Juvenile justice, not necessarily a shoo-in with the Senate this week, right?
Not necessarily, and this kind of goes to the election issue, right? So basically, Republicans are using the increase in juvenile crime that happened during the pandemic. And the Democrats say, whoa, wait, we've looked at the recent numbers and the crime rates, the juvenile car thefts have actually gone down since the height of the pandemic and are starting to normalize. Do we really need to do anything? But then, Governor Lamont's like, look, I'm up for re-election, guys. I think maybe we should do something, even if there is a perception that there's been an increase in crime. Democrats feel like it looks better if they're doing something rather than nothing. Otherwise, they give this to Republicans as a talking point.
Yeah, we have to address this right now, too, because it's a huge political year. We have, major races in the state, including the entire legislature up for grabs. We have the governor's seat. Obviously, there's going to be a governor's race, the constitutional offices. So how much does that play into what lawmakers are doing this session?
I think it's played a lot into it. I mean, look, they're like tripping over themselves to give, people tax cuts. They're trying to be responsible about it, but they're looking at that. They know affordability is an issue. Connecticut is a high cost state already, before the big increase in inflation and, the increase in juvenile crime. I mean, it was a big news story of 2020, this increase in juvenile crime. And so even though it has gone down a little, there is a perception out there that crime is an issue and they really need to do something in order to address it.
We know the races haven't heated up yet. The gubernatorial race is starting to shape up, but we have the conventions coming in May. So we got to kind of see, at least on the Republican side, where that goes. But, watching Governor Ned Lamont, what do you think about him going into November? Is he in a good spot?
Well, it's really interesting because Trump is obviously no longer president. We have Joe Biden as president who, with being president, you inherit everything that's going on, which, includes the increase in inflation. And so, how much do national politics and the tenor nationally, because Republicans usually do well in midterm elections, how much do those national politics impact Connecticut? I think that we've seen in some of the initial polling data that they really haven't had an impact. And look, this is a rematch, right? It's a rematch between Bob Stefanowski and Governor Ned Lamont. And they're both self-funding their campaigns. So it should be really interesting to see where this plays out. But I don't think that the national politics that would probably hold greater weight in another state hold as much weight in Connecticut.
Sure, and it seems, people are going to say no to this, but it seems like some of the decisiveness, it's still there, but it might not have been as prevalent as it was 2 years ago, for example, right? Interestingly, last election cycle, Republicans did decently well. I remember Nancy DiNardo with CT Dem saying that they were kind of disappointed with how Democrats performed throughout the state in Connecticut.
They definitely have done well in previous election cycles. In 2016, the Senate was tied, an even number of Republicans and Democrats. So Republicans do well in this state. I think that they have to have a message that resonates with the unaffiliated voters because even though, it's a Democratic blue state, we also have a large number of unaffiliated voters. And it's those unaffiliated voters that really do decide the election. So it's not necessarily, the party primaries that are going to have much weight here.
Yeah, the unaffiliated chunk, the last time I looked, was the largest of them.
Yeah,
okay.
No, definitely. It's going to be interesting to see. And, Connecticut voters are not afraid to split their ticket. So, they might vote for a Republican governor, but they might vote for a Democratic state rep.
Sure. Mr. Bob Stefanowski, what does he need to do differently this time around, do you think?
I think that he needs to, address the media, be more transparent. I think that was one of the lessons he learned from his previous election. And, maybe not focus. His last election was solely focused on eliminating the income tax, which at the time was absolutely impossible because of the deficit that the state of Connecticut was running at the time. So now we have a surplus. So it's a little easier to kind of, hit on those taxes. But I think that he also has to be perceived as tough on crime, because even though, juvenile car thefts might be going down, I think that there is a perception that crime has increased. And I think that people don't feel safe and that they want somebody to do something about that.
And we know, it was a close election, all things considered. Not as close as Governor Malloy and Tom Foley's race was. Was it the first time around that I think it was like less than 10,000 votes? We love rematches here in Connecticut.
6,000,
yeah. But, there's still a way for him to, it's not so far off. I know the cities have always been a problem, though, for Republicans, right?
Right. And so if he focuses on that, but also if he focuses on the suburbs, kind of the suburbs that are surrounding the cities, I think that he could find a lot of support, because I think that there are, maybe Democratic moms who are registered in the suburbs who might be feeling a little unsafe. And I think that if he, uses that crime issue, he might be able to get to them.
Interesting. We have a busy year ahead of us. We have a busy week ahead of us with the end of session, see what they get done there. But then it's going to be a big political year with lots to come. Christine Stuart from CT News Junkie, great to have you back on The Real Story. Looking forward to having you on again.
Thank you.
All right, that does it for us on The Real Story. If you want to watch these segments again, you can head to fox61.com or download the Fox 61 News app, and you can watch The Real Story every Sunday at 10 a.m. right here on Fox 61. Have a great morning.